Can everybody hear us? We'll let you guys type in the questions if you guys can hear us.
I think you're good to go. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, they can hear. All right, cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our monthly Exchange webinar series. My name is Hayden. I'm a member of the account management team. We lead these webinars once a month, and they're designed to provide current and new Xpress and Xchange users some basic training or possibly just a much-needed refresher. Before I walk you through Xchange today, actually Blake will be doing that, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. This webinar will be recorded, and you can expect to receive that recording in your inbox within 24 hours. Also, you may submit your questions anytime throughout the presentation, and you may do so using the text box under the questions section in your GoToWebinar panel. I'll try to get to these questions as I see them, but if for some reason we're unable to, we'll respond to them at the end of the webinar. With that being said, I will pass it over to my colleague, Blake.
Hey everyone, this is Blake here with the account management team here at Tenstreet. We're going to go over a refresher here today on the Xchange software for verification of employment requests. So we're to get started here. If you want to follow along, what you can do is pull up the applicant either through your search bar or your work list, whichever. And once you get the applicant pulled up, we're going to go over here to the process page. And on the bottom section, we're going to the Exchange process tab, as we call it. And so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. When you get to the Exchange tab, on the top left corner here, you have the auto requests available and resends available. This just gives you a visual idea of how many automatic requests and automatic resends we have set up to key and send out for you. To the right of that is an action dropdown. If you click that, there is an auto request option with number here of the number of employers you can auto request from. We're going to go over the automation settings for your account today. So this is kind of the manual version of that automatic process. So if you don't want the system to use the automation settings, you have that turned off. This is how you can still use the auto request system that we set up, so you're not having to type in information over and over again. Under that is the signature request option. This is going to let you send out a request for signatures for any outstanding releases for employer or education that are out of date or completely missing. Underneath that is the highlight duplicate rows. You may not use this option on every applicant, but what this is helpful for is if the applicant has worked at the same carrier for multiple service periods, you can highlight this to verify, did he work for the same company multiple times, or did he maybe put duplicates, he put in 2 different time frames that are overlapping on his application, something like that. You might need to do a little bit of cleanup from what he's put in. The highlight duplicate rows option makes that easy for you. It will gray out any non-duplicates and highlight the duplicates in yellow. You can combine that with the hide function to clean up the previous employer list here before you send off for your request. And lastly in this menu is the Start Tutorial. If you click that, it starts, and I'll show you here, it takes you through kind of a tutorial version of this system. It's a non-live version, so you can feel free to click through. It will explain everything, each step. So it'll be kind of a super condensed version of the training we're doing today. Underneath the Actions button is a Show History For filter. If you want to this is primarily used for if you're wanting to pre-qualify candidates before doing a really deep dive into their employment history and qualifying them. You can sort by maybe the most recent 3 years. That you'll see it hides here any employers that were outside of that range. We also have 7 and then all time, of course. Down here in the employer list, again, we mentioned off to the left, there is the hide icon. If you have hidden an employer, you'll see here where it says show hidden. You can show a hidden employer and then unhide them with that same button. On each of these employers listed here, they are either going to be listed in green or white. If a company is in green, that means that they are in our directory and we have information on how they like to receive their verification requests. If it's white, that means that the driver didn't select them out of our network. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not. It could be something where the driver typed the company's name wrong, something like that. But otherwise, if you aren't able to find them in our network and correct the driver's mistake, it may be something you'll have to go outside of Tenstreet for. Under each employer is the service period and an indicator if it's their present employer or if it's an employer the driver would prefer you not contact. Now, if you do have one that says do not contact in red here, don't worry, that just is kind of a talking point. It stops the automation and is meant to be, a talking point. It won't stop you from manually requesting anything through the system, so just keep that in mind. To the right of each employer is a section on each of the items you can request. You can click these individually, or it's usually easier to click this check mark to the right side to select all of them. If you have an employer here that's listed as auto request available, and you see the lightning bolt over the gray symbol, you can go ahead and still click the gray symbol and it won't do anything other than exactly what it does. Sometimes we get questions about that. If the lightning bolt there is going to just automatically send the request off, and the answer to that is no. So this lightning bolt that you see over here on the left, showing that we had requested previously, if that's over this, you can go ahead and click that safely and it's just going to be fine for you. In this blank space between the gray check mark and this pen icon, you'll see either a blank space, or if the job was a driving job, there will be a truck there. So you can see at a glance if it was an FMCSA regulated position, or if he was, maybe just a janitor or dock worker or something like that. And then on each employer, there will be a pen icon or another icon here to let you see the status of the release at a glance. If the pen icon is filled in, that will let you know that it is the signed release there that is within date. If the pen icon is present but it's faded out, that means that the release is outside of date but present. If there is a red square, that lets you know you have no release whatsoever. And if there is a green clock symbol there, that lets you know that the request for the signature is out with the applicant and has not been returned to you yet. If at any time you ever need to pull an individual release or check anything, you can click one of the pen icons here, and all of your releases for this applicant will show up in this list here. If for some reason you had maybe a signed release from outside of Tenstreet that you needed to add, this is where you can add them. And if you need to review any individual one, you'll click on the file name here to pull up the document individually. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to collect these 6 items total from these 2 different carriers. We'll click request these items. And on the next page, you can kind of think of this as the Amazon shopping cart. You're going to gather everything, make sure your order is correct, and then you'll send it all off at once. You can see the items we have selected for the order here at the top. Each of the companies are listed here, which we can switch between if we need to. And if you have at any point here you need to delete a company off of your request order here, on the far right are some X buttons you can use to delete them. Underneath in the add request form, a lot of this is going to fill in automatically for you, everything that we can. The employer requested for Tenstreet IA company is going to automatically fill in bold here from the application. And the previous employer, if it matches up, is also going to automatically fill in here.
So we've got a question. Emily Baker wants to know how long releases are typically good for.
That is a great question. You'll want to get with your kind of safety department or legal counsel and kind of determine what your company's policy is and best practice. As we go through the call, I'll show you we have settings for 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. By default, your dashboard is going to default to 30 days. But as I said, if your company policy and legal counsel says, 60 days is fine, 90 days is fine, whatever your guys' particular process is going to be, that's what you'll want to select. But like I said, by default, we go with 30 days. I believe that 90 days is the industry standard, but like I said, for us, we will set to 30 days by default. Great question.
Thank you. Good question, Emily. Nope, that's it for right now.
All right, well, thank you, Emily. We're just going to keep on trucking now. So here on the previous employer, if it's selected from our directory, I'll show you how it looks whenever it's not from our directory as well. Right here we have the location, fax and phone number if we have it on file, the method, and the type of provider this is. If it's a Tenstreet managed one that we have in our public directory, we've got about 15,000 different providers in that network. It's going to say PUB for public. If it's from your own personal Rolex, though, the information that you maintain on your own company, that's going to say PRI for private. One of the cool things about your private directory is if you have to go outside of Tenstreet to get a fax number or an email address to the safety department to get that verification, and you save it to your dashboard, your drivers, when they're applying, will have the same access to that information. It won't work for other companies, but any driver applying to you will have access to that information. So once you get it outside of Tenstreet and add it into Tenstreet, for your company, you don't need to do anything else. It'll be present for your drivers going forward. Under that is going to be the service period pulled directly from the application and the request method. So if you need to change that here, you do have the access to the full suite of options. Underneath is going to be the options, what your items you're requesting. You can change those one last time while you're finalizing this. You can actually, if you're following along, you see on my screen here, if you click the employment section away, you actually see the form dynamically update and come away. So we'll come down here and see the personal information automatically fills in from the application. Any information the driver posted on the application, such as his reason for leaving, will be posted here. Any accidents that he provided to you on the application will also be listed here for the company to verify. But for the most part, you're just going to, once you confirm this top box, you're pretty much good to go. Everything else will fill in for you. So we're going to click Add This Request. And we're going to come down here to the Tenstreet XC Network demo. So I'm going to show you what this would look like. Let's say, now see here we have, of course, the network demo is in network, so it automatically filled everything in like the previous one. But we're going to take a look at what happens if, for example, it's not in our network. To take a step back real quick up here on the item selected for this order, you'll now see that next to the delete buttons is an edit button. So if you edit something, you also can do that without having to restart your whole order. So let's say that the driver put in the name of a company here and it didn't match up to anything. And so what the system is going to do is it's going to first back up until, so let's say that he put in Tenstreet Test Company as the company name. What the system does is it'll back everything up until it starts getting some matches like this. And it'll say, okay, we couldn't find Tenstreet Test Company, but we did find several that matched this. Is it any of these? Did the driver maybe mistype the company name? And this will let you select from the drop-down list and correct for the driver and pull from our directory. But if for some reason, example, the company is not in our network, what you'll do is you'll just finish typing out the name of the company and you'll get this unknown provider box. You can click this to open up this beigeish gray box. This is what keys you into your private directory within the application itself. The information from the application will automatically fill in. So if the driver provided the fax number to you or the phone number or email address to somebody in safety, you will have that. You'll go through and add in the information if you need it. If you had to go outside Tenstreet, so you had to go to their website and found their fax number, or you went to the FMCSA website and got their fax number or email address at safety, you'll come in here and put in the fax number or the email address. And from this default method, third from the bottom, you'll pick either the fax or email that matches it. If you put email and don't put an email address in there, the system will give you an error and kick it back to you. The rest of these options in this list, the work number down, are going to be placeholder options. So for example, if you called the company and you weren't able to get a fax number or anything, you create a phone entry here and add the provider. Whenever you call the company, get the verification, you'll come back to the other side and fill in this placeholder so it has that information for you. Maybe you call the company, find out they went out of business 8 months ago and don't have any records, but the person you talked to told you you could call the driver. They did all their pay stubs as physical paper pay stubs, and so the driver should have one that they could give as a verification, just as an example. One last thing to go over in the provider box is down here at this one-time use provider checkbox. This is useful in some cases when you're contacting a company for a verification of employment and they say, oh, Sharon usually handles that, but since she's out on leave right now, go ahead and just email that to me here and I'll take care of that for you. You still, of course, need to get that verification. You need to get it quickly. You want to send that out, but you don't want to store that for drivers to pick from in the future. You don't want to use it in the future yourself by accident, sending it to the wrong place. So if you check this one-time use provider checkbox, it will use it for this request and all of its resends, but it does not store it for later use. We'll go ahead and click Add This Provider. Oh, let's see, it's giving me an error because of the name, and so you'll see there are options in here for this to protect you from accidentally putting in the wrong information. So hey, this is incorrect. We already have this on file. This has got a lot of smart features like that built into it. So once you get all the information put in and saved, you do have this edit icon to change it, but you'll see here there's a method in the type, our phone and private like we've selected, and then everything else, of course, just automatically fills back in. So if you didn't notice that first time, you also do have an Add This Request button at the bottom. So if you want to add it from the bottom, there's a little more convenience factor there. And so we'll go ahead and add these two requests. Once you've added all your requests to the cart, so to speak, you'll get to this one last page where it says Potential Missing Employers. The system is doing some matching behind the scenes with verifications that have gone through it before and is looking for potential matches that, with companies you're not requesting from. This doesn't mean for sure that the driver worked for this company at this time frame, but it does mean that it's very possible you can use it as a talking point to ask the driver. Nothing is going to stop you from adding and sending this request out. This list here is pretty long. Usually you're not going to see a list this long, but since we're in the test environment, test application, it does show up a few extra times here. If you do have another employer listed on here that is not a test company, the system will automatically fill in the request and send that off for you if you are able to. If you're not able to, it won't add those here. So if it does add those, you do have the option of removing them as well. On the right side will be a blue check mark you can uncheck to remove that request from being added. And then down here with the Tenstreet IA company, you can review one more time before we send off that cart, the request item, what method we're requesting from, the service periods, and then one last time if we need to edit or delete anything. Well, since we're good to go, we're going to click the confirm and send, and then it reloads us back here to the front page on the application. So we have a button here on the bottom left for the completed exchange request that we've created. We'll click on that. And this will take us to the list of existing VOE requests that we have sent out. You'll see on the list here on the top, we have the driver's name, the previous employer, the service periods, the date that you last sent the VOE request, the status, and the items that were requested. So you can click between these. You'll see on the bottom, just like with the application, they will load based on which one you pick in the top and then load in the bottom. So within each of these requests, we have on the right side of this beige box heading the report, some static information about the report, the the providing company's name, the dates you requested from them, the items you requested, the date that you requested it on, the requested method. If they provide back in a different method, this will let you know the different method they use to actually provide the answer back. And then the next action date, which will by default set to 1 business day in the future. To the left side, we've got some more information. There's first this back to subject view button in the top to take you back to the application, the applicant's name in red, the status of this application or this verification request, their social, your birth, a rolling attempts counter. This counts towards experience checkbox, which is going to be one of your very last steps, and then this request ID number. Each individual request is going to have its own unique request ID number. Your resends are going to pull from that same request ID number, though, so that we can track the number of good faith attempts that are being made with that request. To step us back just a second, we're going to go back up to the status list. I'm going to explain what each of these are for you real quick. So first, we're going to go over cancel. If you have created a duplicate request that you just need to cancel, or for some reason there was a duplicate created, you can cancel any request by clicking this. It will give you a prompt before it moves it, so you can do that safely to kind of see how that looks. We also have this refused status. If you sent a digital request that got refused, this will be the status you'll get it back in, and it will give you a reason and activity log why it was refused. If you sent a request off through fax, this is going to be the pending status. That means it's been sent out and you're waiting to receive a response. When that fax comes back in, that will be fax received, letting you know that you received a fax. If you've sent a digital request, so an email or a network request, those are going to be in awaiting authorization, letting you know that the request has left our server, has been sent and is sitting somewhere and waiting for somebody to put eyes on and give you a response. And once that awaiting authorization has been completed and you've received it, you'll be in the submitted status to let you know that the verification has been received back. And then at the very end here, we've got complete, which is going to be your last step. Moving to the complete status is either going to be a slightly manual process or a completely automated process. So I'm going to show you guys how that'll look here towards the next section here. In this section, we also have these buttons in the middle. You have a resend request button on the top. That will let you resend this request. If you click that, you'll see again, that beige box from before opens up down here. Let's see this area where you send a fax from a fax number that the driver gave you, and you get a fax back, and the company says, hey, the fax you need to send to this fax number. This is this is an open fax line. Nobody can answer from this line. Please send here. So what you can do is when you resend this request to the correct fax number, the one that you've just been given, you come in here, edit the fax number, save and resend, and it will update and resend at the same time.
So we have a question on canceling. What happens when you cancel a fax request? Does the providing company receive another fax saying that it was canceled?
For faxes, no, they won't. For email and network providers, they will get a notification. They will see the request is canceled, or they'll get an error URL saying, hey, this request has been canceled. But for faxes, it's just not going to send anything back to them. So, yeah, is that correct? I don't think we send anything back on fax.
I believe it's correct. I believe whenever a fax is canceled, it just, even if they respond, there's nowhere to place it on our end because there's no request.
Yeah, so if you do cancel a fax request, keep that in mind that there won't be a place for that fax to go when it comes back. So if you send something off that you don't want to receive back, you can also cancel to ensure you don't get it back. Excellent question. Thank you.
All right.
Any others?
Not yet.
All right, cool. Well, you guys just feel free to interrupt us if you got a question. I'll be happy to answer. So as I mentioned, once you get in here, you can update. Let's say it could even be something like you send it to a fax and they say, hey, email it to here. You can come in, you can change the fax to an email, and in the middle of this request type, just change the method. Once you've got that set, it'll resend the request, and your attempts counter will go ahead and save and resend, and you'll see that the attempts counter is on up. So back to these buttons here in the middle, underneath resend request is an add edit note button. If you click that, you see here it gives you a box to add in notes. These notes, as you'll see, they pop up right here. So if you need to keep track of anything for this request, anything that needs to be seen before the report, any kind of a contemporaneous note, maybe you gave somebody who was in safety a call and they gave you some information on someone else to get in touch with who you then didn't get a response from and you want to track all that, you can add those notes and then edit them as you need to. Next is an add response button. When you get a response fax back, or if you have to go outside of Tenstreet to add a response, this is where you'll go to manually input that. So let's say for the test company here, we had to go outside of Tenstreet to driver fax, for example. And so we can come down here, information received from driver fax. You can say request sent 7/16, received, 7/16. And then go down through here. You'll be able to provide all the information from that form we saw earlier. Put in the service period date. And everything else will automatically fill in. Anything that he put in before will be here. We'll go ahead. Once you get to the accidents, one thing to keep in mind when filling this out is you'll either want to select no accidents or add at least one accident, and that will complete the form. So once you've got at least a service date put in and the accidents, either an accident in or no accident selected, and the drug and alcohol information put in, click submit response, and then this will track for you. Down here, as we scroll down, we're going to see these 4 buttons here for report, activity log, supporting documents, and print. We're on the report right now. And so you'll see we have the notes we put in here, the information for the previous employer, including the items requested, where the information was received from. When it lists that manually complete, if you do that, it's going to show you who did it and at what time. If there are any additional comments, like the ones that we typed, those are going to be put down here. And then finally, the report itself that's come back. The requested subject information section here is what you've requested. The right side here, you'll see the dates that were provided. If there's a difference between what you received and what you requested, there will be color coding highlights here. You see these are in yellow for the original request, and down here in the provided information that does not match, that's in orange. Down here we also see the original request information and then information about this. We didn't, of course, fill all of that in, but you will get answers on these when you get a response back. All your drug and alcohol information and if there are any accidents. And then finally, at the last of this report page is the activity log that just shows you each step that's been taken, requests that have been resent, anytime you get an error message, anytime a fax comes back into this request, those will be tracked here. All right, so one last thing, we're going to scroll back up a little bit here. On every request from a provider within Tenstreet's network, you'll be able to click this questions about this report button, and we will have a phone number and an email address of a person that you can contact directly for the verification department of that company and ask them. So if you have further questions about an accident, if you get back something that doesn't seem correct and you just have questions about the report, you can request from the verification department directly that way. If it's a private provider that you put in, that information is just going to be pulled from the directory information that you put in. So if you get their phone number or email address of somebody, even if that's not the way that you're sending it, it can be good information to gather so that you have contact information in your private directory. And now back up here with these 4 buttons, we're going to look at the activity log next. This is going to just show you kind of an easier to parse version of the activity log. Everything's kind of separated and color coded a little bit so it's easier to read. You'll also have your supporting documents. So if you have, these are supporting documents specifically for the request for this particular previous employer. If the company sends a fax in, or you have to go outside of Tenstreet and you need to store something for auditing purposes in the future to keep track of with this request, this is how you'll want to add them. You can add them to the supporting documents on your regular document section on the front with the application. That'll probably be just fine. Your auditors probably won't care where you've got the document stored so long as it's stored somewhere with the driver. But just in case, this is where we recommend that you place them so that it is specifically and explicitly tied to this previous employer. When you add the supporting documents in this section here, you won't necessarily have to view it on the front page either, so it can kind of help with your clutter. And then one last section here is the print button. If you need to print this report, you'll click that print button and be given a printer-friendly version of this report. So one last thing we've mentioned is on the going to that complete status. So you'll notice I had to type in some information, the idea being I had to go outside of Tenstreet to get something and manually put in that response that we added on the driver. If there's ever a point with one of these Exchange requests where you have to do some legwork, go outside of Tenstreet, get the verification, come in and type it back in, we're going to do the final step for you, moving it to complete for you, because you've already looked at the safety performance review, the verification, you've confirmed it, you typed it in yourself. So we are pretty solid that you completed that. But let's say that the other company automatically filled out the information for you. They filled out either an email or a network request, so that form is already filled in for you when it comes back. In those cases, as we mentioned earlier, it's going to go to a submitted status. We don't consider a verification of employment complete until you put your eyes on it, because the responding company might have put some wrong information. They may have sent you the wrong file. Something might have got crossed and they sent the wrong social something. And in that instance, we don't set to complete. We put it in that submitted so that you can review the information. And then when you are sure that you're done with it, you'll move it to complete. And anytime you get moved to a complete status, your last step is going to be to check the Count Towards Experience box. So now that we've done that, I'm going to show you exactly what that's for. We're going to go back to the applicant here, where you can now see the completed Exchange request has gone up by one. And we have this Exchange Summary Report. If you click on that Exchange Summary Report, it opens up. You'll see this is a time-stamped report that is pulled at that moment. This is a summary report on that particular driver. When you have these when you have the verification completed and with that Counts Towards Experience checked, what this will do is show you all the accidents, drug and alcohol tests, total experience, and any gaps that are present for what you have confirmed. So you can see where these two that we didn't touch are still pending. So the confirmed experience for those is not active. There's nothing here in the confirmed experience. But for that Tenstreet test company that we did, we now have 49 months of experience. If we'd had any positive drug and alcohol tests, those would be listed, and then any accidents would also be listed here. So this is when you combine those together, is going to just kind of give you a full view when you've completed with the driver their verification of employment. Just give you a report that you can run on all of their experience, testing, and accidents. So we're going to close this out. And everything we've looked at up to this point has been looking at sending off, creating a verification for an individual driver, checking in on that verification and completing it. But if you needed to do that for all of your drivers, as an example, we do have a report here available in your dashboard that you'll all have access to that will show you all of your existing non-completed verification requests. So to get there, you're actually going to go to the top left corner where Xpress is at, and we're going to change gears to Xchange. And once you get loaded into Xchange, which you're not going to come here very often, but there are two things that we do over here in Xchange besides providing responses for verification requests. There's the Exchange tracking option in this Exchange overview. And this is going to be where it shows you all of your outstanding verification requests. By default, it's going to show the next action date of today. So any requests that were created today won't show here. You'll see there's a build test here, but this was from a previous webinar. If we change the date to tomorrow, and you see we can change the search criteria, we can change for whenever it's a specific user that's requesting this, or all users. You can also search by the driver's last name and the previous employer's company name. You click search, we move this to tomorrow, so now we'll see this new, and we created 2 requests today, but only 1 is showing because we moved that one to complete. So on this list here, you'll see we can click that we see all the drivers, we can click through them, and then come down to the bottom and see the request itself that's being created, that's here. Once you check the Count Towards Experience and move this to complete, that will pull that particular request off of this report. So you can use that to follow up with any outstanding requests. And you'll see here at the top, there's a total request count. And if you want to view a full list, you have options there to show how many entries are available. And then before we get to your automation settings, I did want to go over another tool here for you. When you're in Xchange, your tools are going to be different than your Xpress tools. So we're going to come over here to the Xchange tools, and this is your Manage Provider tool. This keys you into that private Rolodex that I mentioned earlier. So if you come in here, you can search for the company name, and it will show you the private providers that you've created. You can make any changes here that you need to, and then update that information. So that kind of covers it for the Xchange training so far. Does we have any questions? Okay, cool. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to go over your automation tools. These are some new tools that we've put out, and they do require some settings. We have some defaults on them. First, though, to let you know is when you come here to get to these settings, you're going to click your name in the top right corner, go to Settings. These controls are only available for primaries on your account. So if you're not a primary, these won't show for you. If you're not a primary, but your primary wants you to have access to these, you will just want to reach out to your account manager or to the account management team. You can email us at account.managers@tenstreet.com. Just let us know that your primary wants you to have access to the automation controls, and we can get those added for you. So we're going to come over here and look at your controls. First, we have the Express control. And the first thing in this category, you click on it, we have a few categories here. The Application Center, this is going to collect all of your application versions. You'll have your full application here where you can view your Intel app or copy the link if you need to add it somewhere. You also have access to your lead application, which is going to be a short form version of your application, which is only going to ask a couple of questions on personal information and then a couple of driving related questions. We also have these landing pages. There'll be one, you can create one for each of your active jobs. And then also if you want to manually create more, you have that option. These are going to be small miniature landing pages for your specific jobs. They're going to have some cool truck pictures in the background, and it's going to be kind of another lead form application. You do have, by standard, you'll get one with your company profile, and then for each active job you create, you'll have one that you'll be able to edit here. And then onward, we're going to go to the automation back over here under Express Control under the Application Center. And there are two sections of Express automation. We have the first one here, the Orientation Date Forms automation. If your company already has the full forms engine, you're going to have a much more robust version of this tool already. But if your company doesn't have the forms engine, this is kind of a little free snippet of it that we created for every company that's just going to be kind of useful to everybody who wants to use it. With this toggled on, you see the blue here toggles it on or off. When you add the orientation date tag, so you're in the application, you go to the tagging section, you add orientation date and put a date in and apply it. The system is going to create a form set for you. It can either be the I-9 and W-4 or the I-9 and W-9. This will then send off to the driver a digital version of those forms. The driver will digitally fill it out and sign it, and then you will get a digital copy back into your dashboard. This is, you're going to universally be needing those forms whenever you have a driver show up for orientation anyway, and so this is just kind of an automated way of setting that up for you and getting it done digitally. And if you end up liking your orientation date forms, you like how much it automates and cuts down the process, saves you on paper and annoyance, since you can just send it to the driver wherever he is in Driver Pulse, he can pop it up and fill it out. Like I said, we do have the full forms engine. It comes with a large number of shared forms that are standard for onboarding. You can just ask your account manager or your account advisor for more information if you're interested in following up on that. And if the question hasn't come up, we also do custom forms as well. So we can set up any kind of custom form you might need. Again, you can turn off this orientation date form by just clicking that toggle if you don't want that on. And then there is the signature request automation underneath. These are triggered by your statuses. So on the left side, you'll have these statuses that never send a driver a request for a signature, and then the ones on the right will be the ones that trigger it. This is whenever you have a driver who does not have a verification of employment signature for signed release with an employer or an education, or it's out of date. You also will have a wait time between sending multiple requests down here. You may check this setting. It's set to something like 5 minutes or 1 hour. You may want to review that and change it. This is basically going to be a buffer time. So If, let's say, you have the driver in the processing status, so it is going to get signatures, you add an employer, and then 4 minutes later you add another employer. The system will not send him 2 messages, but if you add that second employer 6 minutes later outside of this 5-minute window, it does send him another notice. So if you're working with his application a lot, you may want to change that delay down to maybe 4 hours, something else. I mean, discuss internally and see what your best practices might be. And again, you can turn off the automatic signature request by clicking that toggle. So back over here under controls, we also have one more automation set under Exchange Control. We have the automation tool here. And on the right side, we were going to go over the auto request first. Again, with and so auto request has a couple of sections we're going to go over. You have the what provider section. These are going to be for placeholders. The system's going to automatically create, it says here, network, email, and fax methods. From that they only verify through driver fax, or they only verify through the Tenstreet network. If you have them saved in your private directory under a matching method, and you have this method in the active methods section here, the system will automatically create placeholders for you. Just a way, if you have a company that you contact regularly or have to deal with somewhat regular basis outside of Tenstreet, you can automate creating placeholders for them. Under that is the more robust section of the automation, is when requests are sent out. This is going to determine when all automatable requests are going to be sent out. These are going to pull from your processing statuses, so anything that is kind of a process, not a a hiring decision or a new application kind of thing, anything that's just processing the application. Those will be listed by default in your available statuses, and you'll have active statuses you can set to trigger the automation. So when you move the driver to ready for background check, any verification of employment that we can automatically send out for you because of the information the driver provided and the previous employer has already given us for network, when you move them to that status, it'll set up, key up, and send off all those requests. It's one important thing to note is if you have no active statuses, if all of your processing statuses are unavailable, it will send the request on all of those available statuses. So if you want to have some granular control, you can pick it to have specific ones. If you want all of your processing statuses to just blanket request as it needs to for ones that you don't have a verification back on, you can just leave all of them unavailable. Also, next thing is going to be the auto request for most recent employer setting. By default, we never auto request from a most recent employer. That's going to be standard in every dashboard. If you want to manually change that, though, to auto request from a most recent employer when the driver does not indicate do not contact, you can auto request from that. You can select that here and change that. If the driver says do not contact and it's their most recent employer, the automation settings cannot ever catch it and send out. So just bear that in mind. Next, we have the limit your range for your DOT automatic requests. So if the previous employer was a DOT company within the past 3 years, the system will automatically queue up and send employment, drug and alcohol, and accident. If you want to gather more, if you want to say you want to get all 10 years of DOT information up front, you can change that to 10 here. And any DOT employer the driver put on this application within the last 10 years that has automation will automatically request. And then you're probably not going to want to change these, but if you did want to change and not get drug and alcohol and accident information from DOT employers, you can change that in this list here. And do we have a question?
Yeah, let's go back and show them where to send a request for active release signatures.
Yes, excellent. So first part, before I jump back to that page, I'm going to go back to this automation here. And that signature request right here, this is what will automatically handle that for you. If the driver is in one of these statuses and has a release that is not good, and it will automatically send one to him, a request to get one. But if you need to do it manually or you don't want to use the automation settings, we do have other options here. So I'll show you how to manually do that. You'll go back to your applicant. You'll go to the Process tab, back to Exchange. And in your Actions list here, you have Signature Request. This will send him a message that will automatically gather a signature for for all of your employers. It'll update everything at once for him. Kind of the way the driver will see it is it's a really simplified version. He will be able to see all of his previous employers, make any modifications he needs to, and then he'll be presented all of his authorizations and disclosures to provide signatures for each one. But that was an excellent question. So yep, to go back here, if you need to manually do any of the automated stuff, any of the automatic requests, automatic signatures, the action section of Xchange here has both of those, the auto request and the signature request. And then the auto resend is essentially just a timer of re-clicking the auto request. So that third level of automation is also just kind of here. So, but that was a great question. Do we have any others?
Not yet.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that question. So we will go ahead and go back to those automation settings. And we were right here. So as I mentioned, if you want to set the number of years back you want to go for a DOT employer, that's this one that is by default 3. And for non-DOT employers, we default to 10 years previous history. So that also, you'll notice here, defaults to employment only instead of drug and alcohol and accident. You're not going to need that from a non-DOT employer. So if you wanted to change either of the time frames, you can do that. And then lastly, I mentioned earlier that the release expiration date is something that you'll have a setting on. That's right here in these Express controls, or I'm sorry, in the Xchange controls. Like I said, by default, we're set to 30, but we do have the option for 60 or 90, depending on your company's policy. And then lastly, we have the auto resend feature. We can't automate a request for something that's outside of Tenstreet's information. You know, if we don't have them in our network, they don't, they never provided their information to us to have send somewhere. We can't really automate sending that to them. But what we can do is once you've gathered that information to send the request, if it's something that we can control, send digitally through an email or a network or a fax, we can automate the resends on those. So you, again, toggle that to turn that on. The system is going to continually resend network, fax, and email requests, whether they were automatically or manually created, until one of these conditions is met. So you have the total number of times the request has been sent. It can be as low as 1 to as many as 6. That does count your initial send. So if you have it set to 1, it's only going to do the 1 send and then cancel the resend. If you have it set to 4, it will do the 1 original send and 3 resends. Under that is the request is 30 days old. If the request gets to being over 30 days old, let's say you set to resend 6 times and have a wait time of 5 days, it's going to get you outside of 30 days. Once you get past 30 days from the original request, it stops all further requests. And then there's also when the subject has been moved into a disqualified status, those are going to be your final statuses here: not qualified, uninterested, no response, or terminated. You'll have control over that from your full status list. So if you move a driver or an applicant rather into the statuses, it will cancel resends. And then the last one here is the auto resend time to wait between resends. This is how many days the system is going to wait to do your resends. By default, we set it to 2 days, but if you wanted it as little as 1 or as many as 7, you can. One thing to keep in mind with the auto resend is it does have some smart functionality built into it. If you send a verification of employment request at 4 or 5 in the afternoon or 7 p.m., something late like that, the system does not consider 8 a.m. the next morning a full day. So it does have some intelligence built into not overflowing another previous employer with requests. All right. So do we have any other questions?
Well, wait a minute.
All right, cool. Since we've got you guys here for a little bit longer, one other thing we'll mention since we're in the settings now under Xchange Control, you guys have probably seen is the work number integration. We now also have a new work number integration. They are a company that's an Equifax company. One of their products that is for verification of employment is pretty big in the non-DOT space. If you are looking for more thorough verifications of employment, that might be a good route to go down. One of the cool things about the work number is they have a consolidated storefront account type with us, so you get a big discount on reports that you request from them. And then another nice thing is that whereas the verifications we've done today through Xchange have been through this process that we've been doing, the work number ones are actually kind of a report that you'll order from your processes instead of your Xchange. And when you get that report back in, if there are employers the driver did not provide to you on his application, the report will actually stub those in, update his application for you with them. So the work number integration, if you're interested in that, you can reach out to us at account.managers@tenstreet.com. We do have a form for you to get set up on that. Alternatively, you can contact the work number first and get an account set up with them before any automation set up. That will be the first step, is getting a work number account made. If you've already got one that's made, like I said, they offer a big consolidated storefront account type for us if you're using it through the dashboard to get a big discount. So you may talk to your existing Work Number account manager for that. Did we get any questions?
No, we'll wait. If anybody has any questions about...
Yeah, if there's any specific, like if there's a tool that you guys would like me to go over real quick, I would be more than happy to cover that with you real quick. We can, while we're waiting for something to come in, we'll cover pulse control here since that's also in your controls. You'll probably be able to access pulse control also from your tools page. This just controls how your company looks in Driver Pulse, our free driver-facing application. We have just a little under 1 million unique drivers using the application life to date. We get over 100,000 unique drivers filling out applications and active in the app every month. So you can disable Driver Pulse here if you want, but it's a really great resource for having drivers in there. There's a lot of a network effect with Driver Pulse where if a driver is looking for a job and in his area there aren't any jobs hiring with his kind of criteria, but you've got jobs set up and lined up in Driver Pulse that match what he's looking for, the system will automatically suggest you to him. So I do always tell my clients, you'll make sure to leave Driver Pulse on, but if your boss is adamant not to be in there, you can turn it off. In your Driver Pulse options here, you have some kind of social media-like options. You may have noticed earlier when we clicked into the personal profile to go to our settings, we have a profile picture here. You can set to show your recruiter's name and profile image if they have one right here, the first couple of options. The driver may have his own picture on his Driver Pulse profile, so it just kind of gives you a way of seeing who you're talking to, and with this, the reverse for him. You can also share processor and secondary assigned profile image if you guys have a processor assigned. The share status events option here is going to let the driver know whenever you click and change his status, he's moved further through the process. By default, that's on, but you can turn it off. And there's also this cool show refer a friend option. If the driver fills out his application with you and he likes your company, or maybe he's gotten hired by you and really likes you, he can actually have in his application on his Driver Pulse app, there's a refer a friend button where he can send a link for your Intella app to a friend of his. So you can kind of come through here and see there's a lot of different options on what you can set up. Another really big important one down here by default is the send documents in teal. By default, whenever you get a report of these kinds of types received, it will automatically send to the driver through Driver Pulse with this. Just kind of helps with compliance and making sure the driver has a chance to look at the documents, in his background check and make sure that there's something he has a chance to tell you. You can change this to send to the driver once you've viewed the document instead. And if you want to change the types that are automatically sent, you can check these check boxes. And you can also turn it off altogether by clicking no. Another tool that you might have set up your dashboard or may not is a checklist. A checklist is going to be it's going to check for existing documents, processes that have been run, or tags that have been applied. And it will tell you yes or no if it has been. So you can use this to kind of control your workflow. If there's a form you need to make sure that gets filled out before you move the applicant to a next step of the process, something like that, you can set up a checklist to make sure that you're viewing and verifying that. Your checklist can also be set up to show stuff to the driver here, and that's what this shared checklist option is for. If you have a checklist option, maybe you have a particular form the driver needs to fill out, or a particular document, maybe at the step in the process you need to get a copy of his med card. You can have that checklist item shared to the driver so that on his application he sees that he needs to do that. He can send that in to you. And then the very last two things we're going to go over in this section is the Driver Pulse Control status options. This is not the only thing here that is shared with the driver is going to be this bar on the right side. I get this question sometimes. These status options that you have for your dashboard on the left side, they're for notation purposes for you only here. The new reapply, recruiting, these are not going to be shared with the driver. Instead, when you have the driver in the corresponding status, he sees this blue filled bar on the right side. We do have a standard percentage fill here for your different statuses, but if you want to control and customize this, maybe you have a big list of statuses or a small list and you want to change how it looks, you can customize the percentages here. We always do have, of course, the reload default option. And by default, Driver Pulse will tell the driver if you haven't changed your status options, it will say that these declined statuses have been declined. We can change that, so if that's how you're currently set up and you want to change that, just let your account manager know. And then the very last thing before we check for questions and then kind of call it for the day is going to be the edit company profile here. If you come to your Pulse profile page and this section has a red X and it's empty, you'll want to fill that out. When a driver sees your application in Driver Pulse, the first thing he's going to see is your company logo, your company name in bold, and this company description. So you want to make sure that you've got at least a little something here so it doesn't look bare bones to him. Just kind of an eye-catching thing. If you go into it, you'll see that there are some formatting options that you can set up, and then you can save that information. And did we have any other questions? All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone, for sticking through with us here to the end. If you think of any questions after the fact, please feel free to email us, give us a call. Again, the account management line email address is account.managers with an S at tenstreet.com. And if you need to give us a call, the direct account manager line is 918-998-9358. Thanks for your time today, guys. Have a great day.